Greetings, groovy people! Welcome to the channel. I'm the self-proclaimed Blue Dragon. And in the background, I'm working on the cover of Volume 2 of Dark Horse. It's the free, not safe for work webcomic that I work on. Links down in the description. I'm gonna sound really fucking scattered this week. I just got back from a camping trip to the California Redwoods in Northern California. Oh my god, it's very beautiful. Doesn't really even begin to describe these ancient forests, these national treasures, which is something that I'm trying to depict a little bit of in Dark Horse, especially in Time Warp, which is the act that's updating on Comic Fury right now. But even then, it's nowhere near. I'm not capturing the there's a word. Breathtaking are some words that work, but still don't. It's hard to put into words just the magnitude, the history, how humbling, I guess it is, when you're standing amongst giants, things that have existed long before God. I wonder if the Redwoods predate humanity. Maybe not. This week I don't really have a script. I was sitting around here at my desk 2 days before the video is due. I have already recorded footage, and I have lists of topics that I want to cover, that I want to talk about on this channel, and none of them were really relevant to what's going on, what I'm drawing in the background, which is quite often the case whenever I go and record the voiceover for the videos. While I still want to talk about the things that are on my list this week, since I did just return from that trip, I just wanted to, I guess, talk a little bit about, not the trip specifically, because although I do want to talk about the shit that I want to talk about, I get that nobody cares about how my personal trip went. It's the first real break that I've gotten for a while, and there's been quite a few things going on in my personal life. So it was kind of nice to, I wouldn't say get a break from that, because the whole time I was there, I was worrying, oh my god, I don't have reception. Are my parents, is my mom going to call and tell me something's going on? And then I'm not going to get that message. So I was worried quite a bit of the trip, but at the same time, there were many opportunities to kind of step outside of myself and what I find important to my daily life and get that experience of gazing upward at things that are going to outlive my tiny blink of existence on this planet. So I'm not really sure what this video is going to be about. I certainly don't want this to sound depressing, because it kind of sounds like I'm saying humanity is insignificant and I am insignificant. That's not what I'm trying to say. That's kind of some of the things that I'm going to be warbling around, meandering around. It's just kind of what's on my mind, and that's what I want to talk about, and it's also something that is prevalent somewhat in Dark Horse, if only through me trying to depict, some of the natural beauty that is found within the world, specifically in the Pacific Northwest and the Pacific West, but this can and will be extended to other parts of the world also, because nature and an appreciation for our environment is something that has always been very important to me. So I guess I'm going to talk about that this week. And I hope I don't ramble too long. I've got tons of footage, so I can probably ramble, but I realize that, this might not be a video that everyone's interested in, so, and that's kind of true for all my videos. But I do want to talk about things that maybe other people can, there's things that other people can experience if they get the opportunity to. So I think it's something that others can connect with as well. And I guess that's just kind of gonna be what I talk about this week. Okay, so every year I do an Earth Day video. I've mentioned that a couple times, but I don't know how many videos people watch and how many videos people stop watching after a few minutes, and that's neither here nor there. I want people to just watch if they're interested. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining or anything. I'd rather somebody watch and appreciate other than watch and be bored. So I'm not trying to guilt trip anyone. But from a very young age, my mom in particular, my dad to a different degree and in a different way, both of them really instilled an appreciation for the beauty of the natural world, however you might define that, for nature, for places outside of humanity. With my mom, it was much more overt and just kind of plainly spoken than with my father. For instance, my mom every year, well, not every year, but a lot of times there would be Arbor Day events in Springfield at some of the local parks, and because I wouldn't say there were people who were definitely harder pressed for cash than us, but we did have we had a poor upbringing in terms of, compared to a lot of people in our community. We were not rich. But even having said that, I'm smart enough to understand that there are far many more people out there who were even more economically depressed than my family. For all of our quote-unquote poverty, we did at least own a house of our own. We weren't being shoved into small rental spaces and, worrying about where the rent's going to come from and if we're going to be kicked out. And I'm not telling this story so that, people feel bad for me. I'm just trying to explain where I came from, even compared to my mother, who, when she was a child, my grandpa, he was a carpenter, and he actually built their first house that they owned, built it out of cinder blocks. They had a coal burning stove, and she had an outhouse. So even compared to my mother and her experience, and I'm not even going to get into my dad, whose family sometimes had to, both my mom and my father's families, they had to hunt in order for the kids to survive, even if it was illegal. So in comparison even to my own family's experience, my childhood poverty was something that was not even nearly in the extreme as theirs, as well as other people. I know I like to qualify. I realize that I qualify way too much in my videos. It's just who I am. I'm constantly trying to relay my own experiences without being insensitive to the fact that other people have their own set of experiences, and it's not a competition on who was the biggest victim.
Well, when I said house, I mean 'twere only hole in ground covered by a couple of foot of torn canvas. But it were house to us. Oh, well, we were evicted from our hole in the ground. We had to go and live in the lake.
So when I talk about this, I'm not doing this to drum up sympathy for my childhood. I'm just kind of talking about how things were. So we didn't have a lot of spare cash. We didn't always have what we needed. For a while, my mom didn't even have a car, and we lived out in the middle of nowhere. So if there was an emergency, a medical emergency, we probably would have been a little fucked. So it was a real thing. It was real, there were issues, but nothing that I ever had to worry about. And the other thing is, while we were growing up, although we were impoverished, my mom and dad never once told us we were poor. And they never talked about being poor. And this is probably a form of privilege in and of itself. However, the way in which they encouraged us as children to live, they never framed it from the point of view that we are in a want, W-O-N-T, for resources. They always framed it in a different way. Maybe we went to the dollar store and I was crying because I wanted this plastic Barbie doll or whatever the fuck it was. It was never, we don't have money for that. It was always, you don't need that. You have toys at home to enjoy. Why am I going into all of this? Because of the limited resources. I mean, we had plenty of toys, don't get me wrong, but we were always very much encouraged to find ways of entertaining ourselves outside of purchasing things. We got gifts, we had toys. I'm not saying we didn't, but the majority of my childhood, in spite, if it was raining or something really hard, we would be indoors playing with those toys. My sister was more of an indoor kid than I was. She definitely probably took more advantage of that than I did. But the point of this story is that because we didn't have a lot of money, my mom would encourage us to take advantage of what was readily available to us and free, such as for the Arbor Day events, we would go to Springfield, see, I'm bringing it back around, and they would have free things for kids in the community to do, which was really cool because then there were a lot of it was a very diverse group of kids, right? Because it's a free event, so people from all different backgrounds, if they'd heard of it, they were coming here to kind of participate in that. So it might be something as simple as learning how to make suet cakes to feed the birds, or building a birdhouse out of materials that had been donated or something like that. Or a lot of times at these events, because it was an Arbor Day event, it would be everyone who came to the event gets a free tree. And because we lived out in the country, we had a lot of places that we could plant those trees. The other part of this story, why I was talking about that, is because, as I mentioned, I played outdoors all the time. We had toys, but using our imagination and playing outdoors with my cousins who lived on the same property, and my sister too. My sister is about 3 to 4 years older than me, and we have very different interests, even though, of course, we love each other, and we have, especially in our older age, found points of interest that intersect. Like, she really likes French film, she likes to listen to a lot of French music, and we found out that we, independent of each other, discovered this one band, La Femme, that we both love. So we have a lot more things in common now than we did when we were younger. But even then, she would ride bikes with us and play outside with us, and we might play Barbies outside. We had a fence between us sometimes, and we would use the fence for playing volleyball with those big plastic balls. You get the ball pit at the store. You might get one of those for 99 cents or whatever, 50 cents. I don't remember how much they were, but we were always outside. So something that Mom was constantly kind of drilling into us was the importance of appreciating the outdoors, appreciating nature every so often, particularly on Earth Day, but every so often, just out of the blue when we needed spare cash, she would take us quote unquote can camping, which was essentially us driving around on the country road in our big fucking GMC van, picking up the beer cans and the soda cans off the side of the road so we could take the aluminum cans in to get money. But it was never really spun like that. It was always, we're going can camping so that we can beautify and appreciate the beauty of the countryside. Because we also would pick up just regular garbage too and put it in a separate bag to throw away. So I see what Mom was doing. I'm not really sure how much money we made from the aluminum, considering, sometimes we would drive the van, and well, not me, but the van would be driven and it would be parked, and we would do quite a bit of walking, collecting, and then coming back to the van. But still, I don't know how gas efficient this was versus just cleaning up the road. So who the hell knows? Maybe money wasn't the driving factor there. I'm sorry, I'm just laughing. As a kid, I never even thought about the gas or any of this stuff. As a kid, you're just yeah, we're gonna go pick up trash on the side of the road and make the environment, we're gonna fix all the environmental problems by picking up cans on the side of the road. Oh my God. But, doing things for Earth Day, and my mom, of course, she was very careful about stuff that when we were younger, what we watched on television. She wanted to make sure that it was stuff that was, appreciating nature. PBS was pretty much what we watched when we were real little. There were only a few stations. We didn't have cable or satellite or anything like that. So PBS, and there were a couple other stations, but primarily PBS, before they even called it PBS Kids. That's what we watched. Was the children's programming there. And a lot of that also kind of talked about appreciating and taking care of the planet. This was a really big theme in the 1990s, This is when we learned that, CFCs? The shit in aerosol cans and air conditioners is awful for the environment. There's a hole in the ozone above Chile. And, this is Captain Planet. This is stuff that at the time was kind of coming at us from all angles. And so, and really it's important that we do. We really should be doing that more, trying to make sure that, of course, it's not just in individuals. I want to make sure that it's clear that I'm not saying individual actions are the only answers. There are 100 companies that are causing global warming to accelerate at an alarming rate. So this individual carbon footprint, which even I have talked about in some of my other videos, mostly I try to analyze that for myself because it is a way to make oneself feel better about a situation that you don't feel you have any control over, outside of course, joining environmental protest groups, which I definitely support those, and I have participated in protests and things with the Green Party before. Not that y'all need to know that, but it is something that we should be aware of, not just because of our own impact upon the environment, which is important too. I mean, littering and stuff definitely is a problem. But also just to promote an awareness and care so that we are more motivated to hold those companies and our politicians accountable for the damage that's being done to our planet, which, everybody's kind of dead set on getting out to Mars, but it's we don't even know everything about our own planet. There are places on our planet that we have not gotten to yet, and we're ready to rush off to the next, which I'm not disparaging, space exploration or anything of that nature. I don't know and have no opinion on that, no opinion that matters at any rate. But my point is making sure that this is something that we care about, because the environment, it not only affects us as individuals, but the natural disasters that are occurring because of this accelerated, global warming. It's causing significant harm and damage and death to people who already don't really have a lot of power in their position in life anyhow. So it's not just, it's multifold, right? It's all for one and one for all. That's kind of this idea, this, that Dumas had written. It's a very important concept. Doing it for ourselves, doing it for others, doing it because it benefits everyone as a whole. And that was something that, when I was a kid, in the 90s, it was really popular to talk about. Fern Gully, there were lots of films talking about the destruction of the rainforest, or episodes, talking about littering and things of that nature. And I'm not sure if that's really being done so much anymore. I don't know, because I don't watch children's television much anymore. She-Ra doesn't count, right? I love She-Ra. But that was my mom. My mom was very proactive, being part of the counterculture. She wanted us to be aware of things, and protesting worked a hell of a lot better back then than it does now. But you still, I feel, have to go through the motions to be heard. But at any rate, she made it very clear that it was important to have that connection with nature and to appreciate nature, even if you aren't going, as a society, we aren't going to be in it all of the time. My dad's version of appreciating nature was far less overt. He didn't verbalize it. He didn't say, don't litter. He didn't say, protect your national forest. His way of kind of fostering that love of nature was more through taking me out into the countryside and letting me help him survey or go mushroom hunting. We would go morel mushroom hunting. His way of appreciating nature was going out and fishing, a lot like my grandma, which I don't fish anymore, but I do still appreciate that time, spending time with my grandmother. She used to love fishing, spending time with my family as we would go to like New Salem, which is outside of Petersburg, Illinois. We would go to some of the forested areas out there, and we did that as a family quite often. We would go to parks because picnics are cheaper, right? I'm trying to explain how all of this kind of melds together and has helped make the experience that I'm trying to relay to y'all. So it was important to us that the parks and that nature be preserved because it was one of the resources that were free and open to everyone. It was something that we all took ownership in. And as such, yeah, it was the steward's job, like the rangers or the park employees, their job to help keep it clean and sustain it. But in turn, there's a give and take. It's our job to also do our best to preserve and keep this resource for future generations and other people who don't have a fortune to spend to go jet set somewhere in the world, right? If any of this is making sense. These are all things that my parents were able to kind of instill within us without having to flat out state it as such. It's something that, like, as an adult, I've come to realize that was never really verbalized. It wasn't, we need to keep this because, the rich have everything, blah, blah, blah. It was more, these are the resources that are, here for us to enjoy, things that are free for us to enjoy. And it's really important that we keep these available to others so that they can have this same experience, because much like us, they might not have the same abilities to go and see some of the other things outside of the state or outside of their country. If that makes sense. I guess empathy through experience, which is what the Park Service that's the whole point of the Park Service, right? Is interpreting a site and connecting the tangible with the intangible, with the universal concepts, and doing it in a way that isn't like hammering you over the head, because humans are very contradictory. I sure as shit know I am. I'm so contrary. If you tell me something, I'm like, not even knowing what the fuck you're talking about, I'm gonna contradict it. And then I'll think about it and then think, oh yeah, maybe that's right, yeah. But like, people don't like to be condescended to. I don't like to be condescended to. Even when I don't know about a subject, the way someone presents something is very important, because it could be the difference between someone being receptive and somebody just shutting off. So I feel like my parents did a really good job of subliminally showing the importance of protecting our environment and protecting our national treasures without telling us why, or why they were doing it or what the importance was, allowing us to come to the conclusion ourselves, because having come to the conclusions ourselves means more than having someone tell you something, which is, in a way, what I'm trying to do within Dark Horse in a small way is present ideas or just kind of show things and allow people to come to their own conclusions, which really isn't evident because we're not really that far into the story in the larger scheme of things. But I guess I don't like to be... So I'll tell a quick story and I'll keep it short. I absolutely, and I'm sorry if somebody out there enjoys this author, enjoys this book, enjoys this work, have at it. You are your own person, and you are welcome to derive joy and meaning from anything you want to. However, I tried to read Ready Player One. And I came to it with a fairly open mind because my partner absolutely loathed it. And my best friend from college absolutely loved it. And I respect both of their opinions. And I found that quite often, sometimes my partner snubs his nose at things that I just absolutely love. And I've also recognized that my friend sometimes likes things that I don't enjoy. So I was trying to keep an open mind about this book and come to my own conclusions. But I barely got into chapter 2 before I had to set the fucker down because there is absolutely zero nuance. And the entire thing is just product advertisement, naming things that the author felt was obscure, which I feel most of it was not particularly obscure, but maybe that's because I lived it too? I don't know, but it was just very off-putting. It was just a list of things from the 80s that he thought was cool. And I felt there was really little. I feel like from what I've seen of the film and from what I was trying to read of the book, I feel like there was a missed opportunity for something greater, for some greater commentary on what is going to happen in our world if we don't do something about, killing our planet. At least, George Carlin pretty much put it right, making it unsustainable for humans. The planet's gonna be fucking fine, but we are fucked, right? And I feel like this book was a missed opportunity to not just, pay homage to all the great 80s pop culture, blah, 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 bullshit. I'm not going to talk about politics, but that was a turning point away from giving a shit about our planet and just kind of shoving things under the rug and ignore. Here, this author is, he could have said so much more because he's paying so much homage to that 80s materialism in a setting that has been destroyed by that lack of awareness or care for what our actions have done to the planet to make the world so depressed and so uninhabitable, unenjoyable, and essentially uninhabitable, that rather than being able to enjoy the reality that is around us, people have to escape into this void of the mind, which is not even their mind. It's a manufactured, pre-packaged world that somebody else has created where you take the controls, but you can only control so much because whatever. You get what I'm saying? This was an extremely fascinating concept that I feel the author could have done so much more with other than fap over his Star Wars memorabilia and fucking Oingo Boingo, which, fuck, JoJo's did a better job of paying homage to.
You're gardening a rotting bed of oregano.
But I'm getting off on my rant. So the point of all that rant is I would much rather have my illusions in Dark Horse to the things that I like, but not have them be the story. There's tons of references to the Beatles and 60s music in the comic that I realize most people aren't going to recognize, and I'm fine with that. I guess I'm trying to use Ready Player One as a cautionary tale to be more nuanced with what my messages are, and bringing it back to the environment and this trip and wanting to talk about nature. In order to do that, I have been trying to because we need to continue this social distancing anyhow, I've been trying to take time to immerse myself in the beauty of the world around me. And I did that back in the Midwest too, don't get me wrong. It's not like I've just suddenly moved out west and just now started appreciating nature. When like my whole setup here was from childhood, my family really built that appreciation for nature. Whether it be mushroom hunting with my dad, going to the park and having family picnics with my sibling and my parents, whether it's going out and just walking the country roads, riding our bikes, whether it's, going land surveying. And I did work with my dad. I helped him with his side job, which he had to have when we were younger to help pay for some of our additional bills. But like, he would take me out surveying with him. And so on our downtime and during lunch, when he was working on equations and measurements and stuff, when I wasn't holding the prism for him to, we called it the gun. He called it the gun. It's a measuring device. It's not, I know that he started using GPS, but this specific thing measured distance using a reflective pole that somebody would hold over a specific surveying pin, a point, to help measure distance. I'm really explaining this poorly because, I was a teenager when I was helping him with this. But there was a lot of, during lunch there was downtime where we were able to, just kind of fuck around and look at nature. Look at, there was usually like some kind of pond or wooded area, or it might be a field that we were surveying. It was really, these experiences that my parents helped build that made me interested in environmentalism and environmental studies. And originally I was going to major in environmental studies. I took 2 years of classes, both for, just the regular program that I was in that were requirements, but also taking all these environmental studies classes before my advisor told me that we did not have that as a major. And so I went ahead and kind of shifted things around, and I had planned to make that my minor. But, taking these courses and learning even more about the environment really, nature is resilient, but it needs to be given that opportunity to bounce back. When it's constantly under assault, some things will evolve and survive, but evolution it's a very slow process, which I think is sometimes hard for a person such as myself to conceptualize or even visualize. We look at the textbooks, we look at what evolution is, and we see what people think the evolution of such and such was, particularly looking at, the work done in the Galapagos, looking at like the finches and the different varieties of finches and how they evolved from ones on the mainland and yada, yada, yada. But it's so incredibly hard. Like, you look at those pictures and you kind of memorize and you think about things, but it's hard for you to sit down and actually conceptualize time. In a similar way, Solar Sands just did a video on monumentalism, which was fucking fascinating. 100%. I highly recommend that video if you like to think about weird things. That channel he's really done a lot with that channel. It kind of started out, but he's really put a lot of thought into creating thought-provoking content. And this monumentalism, if you watch the video, you just see how he starts with something like the pyramids, or he starts with, things that you can see, what are they, the Nazca lines that are in South America, or are they in Mexico? But the images that were created by people living here on the continent so long ago that you can see from outer space that nobody would have been able to see from the level that they were creating these images. I think that's called the Nazca lines or something like that. I'm mispronouncing it, I'm absolutely certain. But the video, he tried to help people visualize just how long a mile is. And while I argue that scene was maybe a little long, maybe I was a little too high for it, maybe it was not as long as it seemed, but the gist of it is, it's hard to even physically visualize how far a mile is. And in the same way, I'm trying to explain that evolution, just as it's hard to conceptualize how the distance of a mile, it's also hard without having the experience to conceptualize the distance of time. Because we do only have our own experiences with time, and time can maybe drag on when we're bored with something, or maybe time can fly conceptually when we're having a good time. but actually conceiving how long time is, like even now, sitting here in 2021, 2020 seems a hell of a lot longer of a time than, say, 1999 felt. And the point of all this is, sure, given time, things can evolve and adapt to an environment, to a more hostile environment, but there's going to be a mass extinction of mammals and humanity if we don't collectively start giving a shit about the state of the environment and trying to maintain it as is. Unless you don't give a shit, and then I can't, there's no amount of persuading or talking about this that I feel would do any good. But for people who are maybe don't have any idea about just what's happening, I just like to talk about this just to kind of get my own feelings. I mean, there is some level of dread, but also I just think it's important to, even if I'm just having this conversation with myself, talk about some of the things that are influencing me for the story, but also influencing real life. And things that happen in real life, things that I find interesting, are the things that I tend to put into my story. With my interest in environmental studies, I talk a bit about The Postman, and I talk about The Stand, and these are the things that kind of influenced Dark Horse. There are a couple of reasons why I had this series start with, or at least not the series, the first act doesn't start with this, but the inciting incident that created the world in which the characters live in was a pandemic. And this was obviously started back in 2008. It's something that's kind of been on my mind. And I did this for several reasons. One, because we did read, Swine Flu by Gina Colada. And we watched The Postman in college. And of course, all my environmental courses, and just discussing these issues and these topics early on. And they're the things that influenced me when I first started putting the story together. And I wanted to tell my own version of that. But the primary reason was because I have always had this appreciation for nature and the environment. And before I started college, my mom, by that point, my sister was out of the house because, like I mentioned earlier, she's older than me. And my dad, he was getting ready to retire from the state of Illinois. He was the chief of surveys of his division for years. He finally had risen up to that point. He'd gotten promoted to that point, or applied for it, or whatever the fuck happens. I think you have to apply for it. You don't just, they do give people a chance to apply. But by that point, we were less, we were not as poor. Like, by the time I was in high school, we were still very frugal, because once you're in that mindset, it's kind of hard to get out of it, right? Well, I wasn't frugal. I had my first job and I was wasting money left and right, and I do regret that now, considering how much college debt I still have. But my parents were still fairly frugal because they still had one kid in the house. But at the same time, they had enough money where mom and dad agreed to take me on a graduation trip, and then they gave my sister a graduation trip. They took her to New Orleans. But my graduation trip, they saved up, and mom took me to Oregon. And then dad flew out on a plane and met up with us because he had to work. He wasn't able to be there for the whole trip. But mom and she drove out here. She didn't trust me to drive. Rightfully so. And we went through Reno, Nevada. There's just so much of the country that we didn't really stop because we only had so much money. We couldn't piddle piss around. We had to get out to where we were going. But just, we stopped at a few places, and just getting to see even if we were just driving on the interstate, some of the parts of the country, it really made me want to go back and visit those places. I still do. I've done a bit of traveling, but I still have a lot more to do. But we went through Reno, Nevada, and then we basically cut into the northern part of California. We were not far from San Francisco. I didn't get to see the Golden Gate Bridge, National Historic Site, but we did cut up the Coast Highway, Highway 101, and we stopped in the Sequoias to eat our packed lunches. We just brought like crackers and stuff. I weighed way less back then. I ate way less back then. But we just had like packed up a bunch of snack shit, and we only ate out once a day. The rest of it was just eating snacks and sandwiches. And we stopped in these national forests, right? And it left an impression upon me. Mom and Dad had already been there. In the 70s, they moved to Oregon and lived in several places. They lived in Corvallis. They lived in Salem. I don't think they lived in Bend. They ended up eventually living in a little town outside of Lincoln City called Otis, which was a retirement community at the time. But and I think it is. We drove through it. You blink, you miss it. It's still a very small town, which I guess is fine. You know, that's no commentary. Some things never change, right? But they had already made this trip themselves. Only they went through Texas and up all the way the coast of California. Got harassed by pigs on Ventura Highway and told they better get the fuck out because they were dirty hippies. But this was something that obviously it left an impression on her, and she wanted me to experience that. She wanted my sister to experience it also, but my sister at that point was, you know, she was doing her own thing, and she was not particularly interested in that at that point. But when we were traveling, you know, up the Coast Highway, and when we stopped at the parks, when you get out of your car in these parks, when you're at the Redwoods or when you're at the Sequoias, you know, you can see a picture of it, but the picture doesn't do the experience justice. Even having returned from this trip, I took a lot of pictures. I did a lot of video, but even so, you know, it's just, you can, maybe with like a special camera, some of the, you know, my partner's friends were talking about this, you know, maybe if you had a specific camera, you can maybe catch the angles. They tried to do like panoramas, you know, things like that with their cell phones. But while pictures are invaluable for our experience and helping jog our memory, because memory is faulty, it's kind of nice to have something to help jog it. I would still argue that there's no amount of photography that can really convey just how astounding, how, I want to say precious, these forests are to us. I mean, they're important for environmental reasons, but there's something that the transcendentalists were trying to convey to folks in the city. Thoreau, but also had Emerson. There's more transcendentalists. And then you go into like the 1960s, people like Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring. And I think they did a good job of appealing to humanity and trying to explain how important these places are on a, I want to say spiritual level, because I am spiritual, I am religious. I guess I wouldn't say I'm spiritual. I'm a fucking hack. Listen to me cuss like a turd all the time. But let's say that you don't believe in spirituality. I would say an appeal to one's mental health. I think getting out for a period of time and experiencing that which is outside of humanity is a humbling experience. And it makes you realize just how small we are in the greater scheme of things, but also just how powerful we are too, in that even though we are so small, we are capable of having such a massive, a monumental impact upon things that are far greater than ourselves in size. I hope that I'm explaining myself well. I'm not sure if I am. I feel like part of why, there's so many reasons why the manga Full Metal Alchemist appealed to me. It appeals to a lot of people. It was popular for a reason, and if you have not read or seen any versions of Full Metal Alchemist, I highly recommend them. I particularly recommend reading Arakawa's manga, because there's debates out there on whether or not the first anime was better or the second anime was better, it was more faithful, blah blah blah. They're both good in their own rights, in my opinion. People are constantly pitting things, and always gotta have a fucking competition when you can like both versions or all versions. That is an option too. You do not have to pick one or the other. But if you want to avoid all that fucking debate altogether, I highly recommend reading it, because there is that sentiment within this whole idea of all is one and one is all. And while the idea of equivalent exchange, I'm not going to talk much about, I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that concept there was very important. Even if things, events and stuff that happen later down in the story, which when you read it, you'll know what I'm getting at. Maybe things don't necessarily turn out to be true, or maybe things are misleading or whatever. But that sentiment, I think, is still a central part of the story, which I think is relevant to the discussion. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that being amongst the redwoods, or nature in general, being in a forest and realizing how big it is and how small you are, there's a give and take, there's a tug, and I'm not able to grasp the words to explain it. It's both terrifying and illuminating and freeing at the same time. Yeah, individual words aren't cutting it for me. And even if you can't, get out to wherever you are in the world, even if you can't travel to some place that's a, extremely well-known monument, or I should say a park, there are places within one's own state that perhaps one could visit. But if there's a way, I think it's very important to have those experiences so that you can see that there are things outside of your window and there is a bigger world, and maybe that can be inspiring to you or to a person. Maybe that can help put things into perspective, especially if you're in a dark place like a lot of us are right now. Just with things going in the direction that they are, and it can feel very hopeless, and you can feel like you're trapped, and nobody enjoys that, right? Nobody is enjoying this right now. I feel like it can maybe help alleviate some of the stress if someone, has a car and you're able to get out for just a very short period of time, even if it's a day. Because it helps you realize that whatever situation you're in now, because there's a greater world out there, it maybe gives you hope that you will survive this, and it might give you motivation to strive towards bettering whatever position in life you're in. I don't know. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. But nature is very inspiring, and you really have to experience it to understand. You don't have to camp in it. Camping's not everybody's cup of tea. I like to camp, but I understand that it can be scary. And that's not something everybody likes. Not everybody likes to get down and dirty and shit like that, you know? So I understand that, but even if a day trip and just sitting for a little bit and listening to the sounds around you and realizing that there are things and experiences and beings outside of humanity, and it's worth appreciating and reflecting upon things outside of the human, if only to get a break from whatever prisons humanity has constructed around ourselves and around others, if that makes sense. But anyway, I'm just kind of rambling about blah blah blah, rambling about the importance of nature. This might not resonate with you. This may not be a video for you. It might not be a topic that you're interested in. But I don't know. I just think it's important to experience something at least once so that you can know whether or not you like it or whether or not you appreciate it. And these are things that, you know, I'm talking about it because I did just go on the trip, but also because as I've spent this whole video explaining, these are things which have throughout my entire life inspired both me on a personal level in my day-to-day way of living, making changes to my lifestyle because I realize I have the capability of doing so. And since I do, and it is, you know, these are things that I care about, what I can change, what is within my power to change, I will change. And that which extends outside of my personal power, I know that I can try to connect with others who share those values and care about this to try to unite and make changes within the political sphere and try to protect these things for future generations and for our current generation, for you and me and everyone to enjoy, because it's not something that everyone, our lives are so busy, and a lot of us are chained to circumstances that we can't escape from. But if you have the capability of caring and trying to help, and you know, the energy and the resources, and of course you have to take breaks, obviously, but these are things that I feel are important, and I, through my art, am trying to convey that importance in a nuanced way. That's how I'll put that. And that is more than plenty for this week. Holy shit, this is either going to be a super long video or I'm going to have to cut a lot of shit out. But, you know, this is what I wanted to talk about this week. And it feels very egocentric, but, you know, I almost feel like having a YouTube channel in general is egocentric, because it is all about what you want to talk about and what you want to say, and getting attention, right? But, you know, it feels good, and and I think it does some good, so at least for my mental health. So that's what I'm gonna do. I almost feel like it would be really shitty to advertise myself at the end of this really long video where I'm just babbling about things that interest me, but maybe it interested you. If you like the videos, if you like reading Dark Horse or whatever, you know what to do. There's links in the description for money stuffs, and otherwise you can like and sub and hit the notifications bell or whatever. Yeah, I'm done talking. Peace and love, fare you well, and keep on trucking.